Well, Roy, welcome to the podcast. In front of the camera this time. All of us know you as the man behind the camera.
Stressed out.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah.
But we wanted to hear a little bit about your experiences and how you learned on the job and learned as you went. A lot of the things that you've told us haven't been learned in a classroom. They've been learned through experiences.
Yeah.
And so we'll just broadly talk about both Florida and England. and
both.
Two different things, and what you may have learned on the job and what you might have learned before and applied there.
Sure.
So let's start with Florida. I know that was a rocky time, but I'm sure you learned a few lessons going through that. And if you could, just talk a little bit on that.
Sure. Well, when you mention Florida, you mean the film that I made in Florida, in the swamplands of Florida.
Yes.
Chasing an evangelist.
Who disappeared.
Who disappeared. So I was living in the UK, and I was freelancing in video and corporate films and that kind of thing. And then I had a friend who would encourage me and coach me to think bigger about the projects I was working on. And at the time, I was a big fan of charismatic Christianity.
Sure.
And there was a preacher who was a Canadian, tattooed, pierced, spoke in a southern accent, televangelist that had started to do a revival, but not like an old-time revival. It was literally in a church. The church just exploded with thousands and thousands of people because miracles were happening and signs and wonders, and people were seeing angels. It was near Disney World in Orlando. And I thought, wow, what a great story. And that thus began a 3-year near-death experience filming the evangelist Todd Bentley and learning how to do a documentary when I hadn't done like a long-form documentary. I just did short-form stuff.
So you just jumped in head
Just
first.
jumped in, and one thing led to another, and we had access to the stage, and it was just things really lined up into place to do it. So we'd fly over from London to Orlando and then stay for a week, and then this was in June of 2010. Yeah, no, it was actually earlier than that, 2008.
Wow.
The year of Obama. And we ended up, myself, and my crew ended up staying in Florida for 4 to 6 weeks.
Wow.
And learned how to do a documentary and learn the hard way. And so that's some of the, that process, because I didn't know what I was doing. I had a mentor, I had a coach who would just basically say, Roy, you'd be really serious. And I'd be like, yeah, give me some wisdom as to how to, because he was a BBC documentary guy. And he'd go, you will know when to pick up the camera and when not to. And that was all he said. I was like, okay, thanks for that advice.
It's very broad advice.
Yeah. So I think that, like, when it comes to like STLI, I tend to lean on that as to say, hey, you may not know how to do a podcast, but we're doing a podcast tomorrow, and see who jumps at that and see who kind of shies away from that, and in training students, and because we have student partners and as you are, and it's like whoever jumps in and wants to learn can, and there's no big training to it. It's the training happens as long as we go along.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of fly by the seat of your pants kind of thing where just go pick up a camera and do it. And so like when people come to me, whether it be here, I'm like, just stop talking about doing what you're going to do and do it.
Yeah.
Because it's such a huge thing. It's like I went to a film school. I graduated from a liberal arts college, got my master's in film, but I never learned as much as I did outside of, education. The best stuff I've learned is just picking up a camera and doing it. And I think there needs to be that, like in education, an element of that practical, get out and do it, and then see what happens.
And even if you fail, I mean, there's a great lesson to be learned in that. Like, you knew that something else didn't work, and that if you're going to try again, it has to be a different way.
Yeah. So, and those who are really interested in learning will grow in that, and those who aren't, well, that's cool too. You've learned that you don't like to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So that practical thing that comes to like experiential learning and professional development is so important. Is like because you're in an educational setting, it's a lot of theory and it's a lot of ideas and a lot of talking about things. But when you really are in the real world, you have to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And especially when it comes to filmmaking and media.
And a lot of the internships I've been a part of over the course of my college career, it's kind of been like trial by fire. You get thrown into the mix, and you just kind of have to figure it out as you're going along. And a lot of the educational aspects do help. Like, you kind of know roughly what's going on. Mm-hmm. But everything's different in every aspect of the professional world. And
so when you went on your first internship, were you surprised by having to do things on the fly, or
I've always enjoyed that. That's always been like, I enjoy making it a little bit harder for myself. Waiting till the last minute for things, kind of just doing it as I go, riffing off the cuff.
It's very, very zen.
And
very good.
I don't know, I kind of find peace in that. It's like a little bit of chaos. Doesn't hurt.
Yeah, and I think you grow the most in that. But so you've had like several internships.
Mm-hmm. So I've worked for a lawyer. I've worked for the federal government. I've worked for federal government in different aspects. And all of those things have taught me that, you just kind of gotta just do it. You're not gonna be, your hand isn't gonna be held every time, you're not gonna be walked through everything. You just kind of have to figure it out as you go along.
But how does that differ from classes and courses here?
Classes and courses here are very laid out. Like, there's a clear goal, there's a clear expectation, there's clear things that are expected of you from each assignment. And I think one of the lessons I've learned is it's not always like that. There's never a real clear goal. There might be one or two goals that you have to achieve on the way, but everyone's end game is different for them. It's not just like a cookie cutter, hey, do this, you get an A.
Yeah.
And in the real world, it's do this, maybe you get promoted.
Right.
Maybe you leave for a different professional track.
Well, sometimes there's a lack of a formula in the real world. Sometimes it is really you've got to hustle, or you've got to do things in a certain way that aren't according to a formula.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how much. Well, okay. So going back to coursework, when it's laid out like that and you know what to expect, does that help you in any way, or does that help you in a different way than going out into the real world and getting an internship and just doing it?
I've always enjoyed the doing it aspect more. I like having that question mark day to day. I like being surprised at what's going on.
Yeah.
Sometimes it just feels like too much of a framework around you where what's going on. It's just kind of getting through the day.
And in terms of coursework, how does it help you though? Meaning as opposed to an internship.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you learn a lot of valuable skills. It's you know what's expected of you. You go through and you do the preparation, you do the assignments, and that kind of helps you in the long run where you know what's expected of you from your day to day, but maybe something else comes up, and now you have the skills to kind of go off of that.
I remember I graduated from Moravian College in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. But I also had taken 2 years at the School of Visual Arts in New York City, which was two radically different experiences. One was in New York Art School, and one was a liberal arts institution in a small town in Pennsylvania. I learned more about painting and art from the liberal arts classes because you were more nurtured. It was a more nurturing environment than New York City and School of Visual Arts, where it was very harsh. The instructors in School of Visual Arts were very, very in process artists, and they were very harsh in their critique. Mm-hmm. But in liberal arts, in Moravian, there was a much more nurturing, let's learn this. But at the same time, my greatest course was expository writing at Moravian with a working author called David Taylor. And he taught us real-world stuff, deadlines. We had to apply, we had to send proposals to actual magazines. Mm-hmm. We had to get that feedback. And I just remember how that really made my writing so much better because I knew I'd be like sending it out. Mm-hmm. I knew it wasn't going to be in the college environment. I knew that there was another step in it where I felt like I was connecting with the outside world. And the greatest thing he taught me, the David Taylor guy, the professor, he taught me about deadlines. So he'd say, he'd have a class assignment, it'd be done. You'd have to have it done in 2 weeks. I would always miss that deadline. I'd walk up to him with the writing, with the paper, and he'd go, "Oh, Roy, that's really wonderful, thank you." And then he'd hand it back to me. He's like, "You're late. That's you didn't hit the deadline." And that taught me such a valuable lesson to hit deadlines when you need to.
Yeah, that personal accountability aspect.
Exactly, and you don't always get that in college. I know that there have been educational experiences I've had where a professor will be very gentle about, "Oh, if you can't hand the script in by here, try this." Mm-hmm. There's a much more, a softer environment sometimes. And it's just interesting how you mix real world skills with education. Have you ever taken a course where it mixes like the element of being and interacting with the real world and in a safer environment in education?
I mean, not too much to that extent, but there are aspects of that, of the framework that you just laid out, where I have been in. Like, a lot of my government courses are like, this part, your proposal has to be by here, your first draft has to be by here, this has to be by then. Yeah. You have to have an annotated bibliography by this point, and you have to check in with the professor each time and kind of talk about your work. Yeah. And that's kind of helped me piece everything together. I've definitely liked those courses more than I've liked just, here's the due date.
Right.
Get it done.
Yeah. Yeah. Because in the job world, in career world, you really need to meet those deadlines. Mm-hmm. And it needs to be a clear thing. What have you, because you've been with STLI for a couple of years, right? Yeah. Because you've been a STLI student partner. You're our senior one, along with Jada. You've been here the longest.
This is year 3 for me.
Year 3. So you've been here longer than any student partner except, maybe Grace Helmick. She's been with us on and off for 3 years. Okay, so what have you learned? Has STLI helped you to do anything?
Yeah, I mean, STLI has helped me kind of look through things more analytically. This won't work, that won't work. Maybe I need to do... It's better help me structure my time, too. I need to be more... I've learned a lot of accountability as well. Hey, Roy, I'm not going to get this done in time. Can we work something out where this goes? And then, last week, how I was...
you were
kind of MIA.
AWOL. You were AWOL from the podcast. I'm like, where's Sam?
I have a lot of assignments and a lot of exams last week, so we worked something out where...
Yeah, no, it was good.
Now we're here
you
talking
still
on the same podcast.
Communicated. Yeah, no, and usually you've been really good about sending a text beforehand. Hey, I can't make it because of this class or this schoolwork, and that's really helpful to at least know that, because it's not. the stuff that STLI does isn't more important than your education. It's more important that you adhere to your class schedule and that without it affecting it. What have you learned through podcasting?
Podcasting, I didn't know anything about podcasting
But now
before
you're
this, and now it's just kind of I've learned a lot of technical things, but I've also learned a lot of just like keeping the conversation going, making interviews more of a conversation, making people feel more comfortable, trying to take the scary part out of it. People are so intimidated by it at first.
Yeah.
And I think the new student partners have felt that, but I think the kinks have been worked out in the past
They
2
jumped in,
weeks.
yeah. And I think you helped them by your kind of laid backness in the questions and how you kind of, those first 2 episodes were really helpful that you were there because you've been through it. Mm-hmm. You have your own style, and which is very laid back and funny. And I think that helps them to know they can be laid back and funny too. It doesn't have to be this intense, get it right.
It is a school podcast, but you can also make it fun. It doesn't have to be so cut and dry. It doesn't have to be all scholarly talk. There can be some conversational aspects, but as long as the main points are brought up, you did a good job.
Yeah, and in the end, it is literally a learning experience. We're demonstrating the learnings that we're learning in the podcast, and kind of search out what it's like to be a student, what it's like to relate to faculty, what faculty really, how they interact with students. So there's something great there. It's like a very world within a world kind of thing, very meta.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Roy,
Sam,
thanks for talking to me.
Thank you, Sam.
I appreciate you stopping by and going in front of the camera this time.
Stopping by my office, yes. All right. Thank you.